Welcome to the AI in Education podcast. We often talk about technology, but today we are talking about the human spirit. Our guest today, Silvia Morrison, is a retired educator who refuses to stop teaching. From building libraries in Ghana to challenging the very foundations of the modern school system, Silvia joins us to discuss why she believes the traditional classroom is actually dead, and why we are all just too afraid to hold the funeral. In this episode, we explore the difference between training for compliance and true education for leadership. If you've ever felt like your child is bored, stifled, or simply outgrowing the walls of their school, this conversation is for you. Let's dive into the rebellion of learning.
Good morning and good afternoon and possibly good evening. Rahman and Silvia. We're very happy to have Silvia Morrison here with us this morning, who calls herself a retired educator, but refuses to state that she has had a career in education. Rather, she's a speaker and a writer and has worked in the world of education, and yet has done so outside of the normal channels. And I really appreciate that sort of mindset that we were talking about. Thinking outside of the box and acting outside of the box. It appears that Silvia is involved in an organization called Links Across Borders, as she has this poster behind her. And I'm really interested in exploring some of the work that Silvia has done. You've also lived in Canada for 35 years, Silvia, in the St. Catharines area. And that makes us relative neighbors on the global scale, as that's only an hour and a half drive from our place here in London, Ontario. So welcome, Silvia. We're really happy to have you with us and really interested in exploring the concepts of education and what we can do about education in a world that is transforming so rapidly and is so dearly in need of guidance and inspiration. So welcome.
Thanks, William. It's good to be here. I love conversations because it's the way that we get to learn from each other and teach each other. Yeah. And these shared conversations where we don't know exactly where it's taking us, except that we know that based on who we are and what we believe in, we are opening minds, including our own.
Amazing. It might be interesting then to understand what are some of your thoughts about education, its importance, what are some of the activities in which you have participated in your recent years, and where are you at right now? What are the projects you're working on currently?
Yeah. Well, I've been a classroom teacher in educational institutions since the very early 20s of my life until the late 40s of my life. And so I've taught from elementary school to college in Toronto.
Sure.
And I'm now a retired educator from the classroom, but I'm an educator until my last breath. Yeah, because I believe in education. I am the founder of Links Across Borders, this organization that's represented behind me. And Links Across Borders is an organization that I founded after traveling to Ghana for many years and noticing that children did not have access to books. And I believe that there's a lot that we can learn from books. I learned a lot from books, and I've written books as well. And so I wanted to provide children with access to books, and I started building libraries in Ghana. I've built 8 libraries to date and have donated hundreds of thousands of books, computers, and lots of educational resources and programming here in Ghana. So I am currently in Ghana because I decided to step away from my work as a teacher in the classroom to be on the ground in Ghana supporting education, supporting children's education, really. You asked about my perspective on education. And for me, and that's one of the reasons I stepped away, for me, education in the classroom is quite restricting and constrictive in a way. And so students come in, and for many students who we sometimes label as being the kid who is making trouble or the kid who is not following the rules, that kid who gets detention, or from my upbringing, that kid who gets a whipping, it's usually not because the kid is bad, but it's because, in my view, the kid is bored, or the kid does not feel stretched enough or challenged enough. And so the mind that is just like unsettled is not at ease because there's so much that this kid wants to do, and sometimes is not able to express what it is that they want to do because they don't know, but they know that there is more, right? And so for me, education is not only in the classroom. Education can happen and is always happening. For us as leaders, as adults, as educators, we have a responsibility to really pay attention to who the learners are, including ourselves as learners, and therefore seeing what are some of the best ways. How can we change this? What parts of it are outdated? And what are the new innovations, new initiatives, new inventions that we can incorporate? So I find that as I get older, I am kind of that child in the classroom who couldn't follow the rules, couldn't sit still, and didn't fit in the classroom. So yeah, that's where I am. That's my broad take on education. The classroom is outdated, to be honest. That is my view. I will say that anywhere. I think the walled classroom is outdated. And I think that many teachers are still teaching in that way for many reasons. It's a career, you get paid, and so on. But the ways in which we could explore, the mind wants to explore, that's being restricted. Yeah.
Wow, those are such poetic words you have shared with us, and music to my ears anyway, to acknowledge the challenges we face with education. In conversations with many people, it seems to me that the word education has lost its intended meaning, perhaps. And there are several related words, such as training and indoctrination. And to my mind, we have all three present in our world in different mixes and different amounts. I would love to hear your perspective on the meaning of the word education in the light of these other words, training and indoctrination, and how does that affect the outcomes in our classrooms, and what does that say about the relevance of the classroom to our society?
Good one. See, for me, education is really about, and I'm not thinking of the dictionary meaning, because in fact I've not looked at it. I don't know if I've ever looked at it. So I'll tell you what it means for me. It's about learning. And it doesn't mean that you have to be taught. That you being present in your life and being present in your environment and being present to what's happening in your community and your world and yourself in relation to that is experiencing education on an ongoing basis. Yeah. Even if we're not paying attention sometimes, we're still receiving education. We still have access to education. In relationship to training, I'd say most of what happens in the classroom and in other places of learning is training. It's training in terms of training someone, training the learner to know and practice and do what I want them to do, or what the curriculum says do. And it might not really have anything to do with who they are, what their interests are, who they are here to be as human spirit beings on this planet. They're just learning because they're being trained to do something. And we could get good at something we're trained at. But it doesn't mean that it serves us. And so I believe that for me, education is supposed to serve me, serve my life, serve who I'm here to be, serve the leadership that I'm here to bring. And training is a kind of brainwashing, so that I will conform to certain ways of doing and acting and behaving. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, such an interesting take. I'm really appreciative of hearing your perspectives. Uh, I think when we reflect on training and education and indoctrination, we can harken back to other places and times in history where certain processes were prevalent in societies. Traditional societies would pass on knowledge and wisdom to the next generation around the campfire in the quiet times. And oral traditions were highly prized, and memorization and accurate conveyance of these oral traditions was a very common thread throughout the entire world. And then with the advent of technology, we see the emergence of different forms of education. I remember reading and hearing a lot about Prussia and England. Those are particular places where the need for a different kind of education became apparent with the development of industrial technologies. Having industrial scale output required humans to be active in particular tasks for extended periods of time, and thereby disrupting the traditional patterns of behavior and living in their communities. And so I think a lot of the concepts of the modern education systems, when I say modern, I put it in multiple quotes there. There was a requirement to form behaviors and ensure compliance and accuracy so that factory equipment could continue running around the clock. And that is largely what's happening in the 19th century in various parts of Europe and North America and the rest of the world. And I believe this modern classroom descended from those times when we needed to create these compliant workers who are able to spend long hours and sacrifice their family and community time for the sake of the machines and the industries. So that really causes one to question, well, then what should we do with our education systems as we have such a psychological momentum, creating these classrooms all around and putting these kids in the classrooms, telling them to be quiet, to listen to this expert at the front we call the teacher, and expect great outcomes from a system that is quite a departure from established human patterns that have existed for millennia. So I suppose another question that comes to mind then, well, what is the purpose of our education system, and why is it that it seems that there's such a blank, what I would say, I guess there's something missing from our education systems. We have the schools, we have the teachers, we put the kids together, and there's something missing.
Well, I think it's more than something missing at this point in time. It's that school as it whatever, whoever started it and the thinking behind that, that which they had created, school as we've known it, school as I grew up in, and and proudly became a teacher in, and loved teaching, still love teaching. Um, that we've outgrown that. Yes, our world everywhere, even in this village where I am, our children, our students have outgrown classrooms. Yeah. And so it's like there's a death that has happened, and we as humans are not ready yet to have the funeral.
Yes. We're not. Yeah, that's a
We're
strange
not ready.
denial.
We're not ready to have the funeral. And so we continue to feed this thing as if we don't know that it is dead. And 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 I say that with, I laugh, but there's also a sadness in me because I visit schools. As I said, I've built 8 libraries. Yeah. And I visit schools that I'm supporting with books and programs. And, you know, I see the students and I see the teachers and I'm engaging with them. Just a few, on Monday, we were at one of our high schools here where students gathered from several schools in the region, and we were at a STEM fair. Yeah. And we had guests from the US, from a very large um, internet provider company. And they were here, engineers were here. They send rockets into space. And it was great for the kids to be with them. And as I would listen to the kids who had created various projects that they had, made, innovated, they so brilliant, as they would describe what they created and what was the purpose of it and what problem it would solve in the community. And I'm like, oh my gosh. It was just so refreshing to listen to them. I would watch them stand up like boys standing up like leaders of corporations and speaking into the mic and defending their project and selling it to the audience. And then I know that I've seen those same kids in classrooms, in the math class, or in the English class, or the social studies class, sitting there looking, or in the reading class, sitting there just looking like deflated. Like the one that was talking at this STEM fair is a different person than the one who is sitting in the classroom. And so what I see happening is that our students, our young minds, are being stifled in a way in the classrooms because they're at a different place. And the teachers are still being trained to teach from the old curriculum from when I was a child, and I'm in my 60s right now. So we're still preparing teachers to teach from the old curriculum. And there isn't space for kids to innovate and just explore and have adventures, and see the world as the classroom. Then our students are suffering. And our teachers are also just watching the death and pretending that we don't know that a death has happened here. It's sad. It is sad.
That is, yeah, really moving words. And I feel for the billions of children and teachers out there that have to suffer through these systems. It is, in one point of view, you would think the educational system, the hierarchy of teachers and vice principals and educational administrators at the school board level should be in place to promote the well-being of our communities and our children and our parents. And it seems that somewhere along the way, we got everything we reversed. We sacrificed the well-being of the teachers and the students and the parents for the well-being of the bureaucracy. An overreaching bureaucracy. It's designed, in theory, to support human well-being, and in practice has overreached its moderated or moderate condition in such a way that we just see whatever can be done to preserve this bureaucracy will be done, despite any consequences for those who are immersed in it. A strange condition indeed.
That's the sad part.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the sad part. Yeah.
And so we have, I love to talk about STEM. That's my, one of the themes of my last 20 or 30 years, bringing STEM into the classroom. But I'm also interested in every part of the educational process. We invent rockets to go to the moon, an amazing computer system so that we're in 3 different parts of the world and we're in the same room. And we can't invent a suitable bureaucracy. It just seems so imbalanced. It doesn't seem like it should be that difficult. Can't we organize people to be in a way that would be conducive to the health and well-being of our communities? I don't know what your thoughts on that would be.
It's not that difficult. What is difficult is that the thing about bureaucracy is that there's so many parts to the systems of bureaucracy that even folks who are upholding and are making sure that certain policies and procedures are being followed do not agree with the systems, with the policies, with the processes that is their job to enforce that this happens. And I find, I've seen it often, I've seen it in many places, where when you have a one-on-one conversation with an officer in some part of the bureaucracy, the hierarchy of the educational system here or there, wherever that is. On a personal level, if you were to be chatting with the person at lunch or on a walk, or sitting on a park bench, they will tell you something that is completely different than what they are doing or saying when they're in their role in the office. Right? Yeah. And so it is that it's a big ship, and you can't just turn it in one turn. Yeah. And so what is required is people who will just be maybe rebellion in the classroom, rebellion at the staff level of teachers saying, this is not working for the students I'm teaching, and so I'd like to do something different, and I have a different idea, and I'd like to try it out with my students. Will you allow me? Yeah. In fact, when I was a very young teacher, when I started teaching at the age of 23. Yeah, I was 23 when I graduated Teachers College and had my first class of students, and I still remember them. And within 3 years of being in the classroom, I decided to challenge my headmaster. Yeah, and I was taking a big risk, but I was prepared to deal with the consequences of it. And I said to him, "Sir, my students can do much better. And I have ideas about how they could do better with me. But the way I am expected to teach them is not working. What if you allow me to do something different?" And the reason we were having that conversation was because I had started doing some things different in my classroom, and I was being questioned, and I just thought I'd say the truth. And so I expressed what my truth was, and he wasn't in agreement with that. And I said to him, "This is what I'd like to enter into this contract with you. Allow me to teach this curriculum in the way that I think would work for my students to do better. If by the end of the semester, my students are not performing above grade level, fire me."
Wow, that's an amazing gamble. Well worth it, no doubt.
Yes. And he couldn't believe that I was saying that, because I was a very young teacher. In fact, I was the youngest on staff. And he said, "Are you sure of what you're saying? Are you sure you want to do that?" And I said, "Yes." And I said, "Sir, to push it even further, I will say this in a staff meeting so that if you get to fire me, my colleagues won't think that you're cruel. They won't say you are this or that. I will tell them that you had warned me and I asked you for this opportunity." He said, "Good." And so I did. I made the announcement in a staff meeting.
That's incredible. That's the way to be a rebel.
And so I know the end of that story. Of course, within weeks, my students were performing above grade level. Teachers were asking me, "What are you doing with those kids? Why are they acting like this?" I decided that we were going to become a team. And we had certain rules that we were going to work with. And that no student is going to try to be the best student above the others, that we're going to work together. We're going to look out for each other. We're going to stretch ourselves. We're going to include our parents. And I would stay back and call parents in for meetings under trees and by the roadside to talk about their kids, so that we could, because that's how it is. We're all in this together. Now it's a different time, but it still takes each individual who is part of the bureaucracy, is part of the system, to speak up and say, "Of course it is risky, but sometimes, even the person in charge is wishing that someone would say, 'To heck with this, it's not working, I'd like us to try something different.'" But when we all sit in compliance, when everyone is trying to not rock the boat, we are all on the boat like dead people.
It is such a tragedy, and really inspiring that you did that. I hope you don't mind if I tell that story, because people need to be inspired to put their feet down and stand up for the well-being of children, their parents, communities that they're
Thank you so much for joining us and being part of this vital conversation about our children's future. Don't go too far. We are just getting started. Next week, we are continuing this conversation with even deeper dives into the latest developments, including some brand new game-changing ideas that will completely shift how you think about AI in the classroom. You won't want to miss this. Until then, keep exploring, and we will see you in the next episode.